So today's episode, we're going to cover instant recovery. Instant recovery is the ability to stand up last night's backup of any server or multiple servers within minutes. So Walter, before I get into doing the demo for the instant recovery, what's one example that you've done recently where you've used this in the real world?
It's a little bit geeky, but instant recovery is a really cool feature. Whereas traditionally we would restore a server if a client called us and had something that had crashed and they needed restore, the process could take several hours to get a server back up and running. Whereas with an instant recovery, we can get that server up in minutes and present the data right to the clients.
Thanks, Walt. What I'm going to do is walk you through how we do an IR. So here is all of the local backups. We have immutable and non-immutable backups of the same two servers. We'll get into them in our next video on what immutable is, why you want to use it. But for this one, we're going to do instant recovery. So we're going to take this server right here, and we're going to click the instant recovery. And if you want, you can go open the recovery points. You can see all of the backups of him. You'll notice this one goes back to 321, which is when we set up the lab. This one only goes back to 328 because that's the last time we used the lab for a demo. And in that demo, which you'll see in the next video, we delete all of the non-immutable backups. And we emulate that being a hacker, and you lose all your backups in that case. So we'll talk about in that video. Make sure to watch to see why you want immutable. So in this case, I'm going to stick with the latest one for the restore point. And I'm going to hit next. I'm going to rename it and send it to a different location. You can restore it. If this was a production recovery, I would have left it at restore to original location. But for this demo, I just want to stand up another server. And I'm going to leave the rest of these. This is the appliance. This is the demo appliance. It's not an exact replica of the appliance that we send to a customer site. It is a much smaller version just for the demos. And what's important here is the redirect write cache. What that's going to do is essentially IR is taking last night's backup, and it's going to present it to your ESXi hosts, or in this case, to my local ESXi appliance, and it's going to present them via NFS. It's going to take last night's backups, present them as VMDKs over NFS protocol, and it's going to then create a snapshot, and all new data, because this will be a live server, all new data will be being written to the NVM flash that's local in our appliance. So really cool feature here that we're not going to demo today, but I'll walk you through real quick. When you stand up a server via IR, or even when you do a regular restore, you can check this option. You can scan the entire machine pre-booting it up with antivirus software. The benefit of doing that, it's kind of like taking a physical USB key or a virtual USB key and booting up from the rescue USB key and doing a scan of a server that's powered off. None of the files have been opened yet by the server booting up, so it's the safest way to find viruses and get rid of them, ransomware, etc. So you could scan the entire image or just the OS. If you find something, you can have it abort the process, or you could say, go ahead and proceed, but just disconnect my network adapters. So I'm going to leave that off for now. And I'm going to say demo, and I'm going to connect it, and I'm going to power it on and finish. So that goes. So, all right, so now that we got that running, what I'm going to do is switch over to the ESXi appliance. And you're going to see the three servers that were up, and you just saw it pop up. There's the IR demo that just got created by Instant Recovery. We're going to switch back to here to watch the process. You can see it registered it. It created the NFS mount point to the Linux repository. So essentially what's happening here is the ESXi host has an NFS mount point to the Linux repository. It takes those VBKs and VIBs, which are the Veeam full and incremental backups. It presents them to the ESXi host. as the VMDK, like I mentioned. It then creates the VM within the ESXi host. It creates a snapshot of that host because obviously last night's backups are read-only. So the snapshot is then going to write the new data to the NVMe flash, like I mentioned. And we're going to close that. The IR is done. We're going to go over to the server. You can see here it's powered on. And let's click on it, see what it shows us. Oh, so you can see it booting up right there. So from the console, from the Veeam console standpoint, it took less than about a minute to perform the IR. And then depending on your server and depending on the applications on your server, it could take anywhere from 1 minute to 5-6 minutes for the server to boot up. Walter, what's another example of something you've done? I know it's not just for disaster recovery. You also have used it for, I know, some migrations for cloud customers. You've also used it for DR testing. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, the Veeam makes migrations to cloud solutions a breeze. We actually will stand up an instant recovery of your server. And then, as you may have seen on Greg's demo before, that the bottom option said migrate. There was an option to migrate. So we can actually use Veeam to now take the server that we stood up and migrate it to the cloud. So it as I said, takes cloud migrations and makes it a simple process of standing up your server, migrating it to your cloud storage, and now your server went from running in your environment to running in your cloud provider, AWS, Azure, whoever you choose. We also do the same with DR tests. We will instant recover all of your servers for a DR test, and we can get your DR environment prepped. When you
do that, Walt, when you do the DR test, where are you standing up those servers?
The DR test, we recover to a DR environment that we have configured in our data centers, which is set up specifically for doing disaster recovery, not just testing, but should anyone actually have a disaster, we've prepped an environment where we can restore their servers to and have all of the data, networking, just as if it is in their office.
Where else can you do an IR besides your data centers?
As I mentioned, you can actually do it to the client. I can do it in your environment. I can do it on your appliance. It's in your office, so I can actually restore a client server into their own environment. I can restore them using IR. I can stand them up a second copy of a server. I know several of our clients have had something where they were doing development on a server and they made a change and they needed to compare two versions of the server. So we were able to stand them up a copy of a 2-week-old and a 2-month-old version of their servers for comparison and get that to them within a matter of minutes.
All right, cool. So you mentioned a good point I'll show on the screen. So at the end, it says waiting for user to start migration. And I mentioned it took about a minute or so. Actually, it looks like it took about 45 seconds. So it is very instant, that recovery, and then just the couple of minutes for the server to boot up. What happens at this point is, as Walter pointed out, this is now waiting for recovery. It's running on our appliance. It's back in production because I selected the option to connect it to the network. And users can now see the server. They're able to get access to their files, their applications. It's a fully live server, but it's running on our appliance. And maybe they chose to have us do that because they were having an issue with their SAN. So we did a bunch of IRs to get all their servers up and running on our appliance. And now it's a few hours later, they've got their SAN back under control. They've got everything working. And we can essentially do a migrate to production. And essentially what we do here is we are, and I don't have this set up in the demo, but if this was in a customer's building, as I went through these options, I would select their vCenter, their ESXi hosts, their SAN, their resource pools, and click next a couple of times. And then what it'll do is it'll start taking last night's VBK and all the associated VBIs for the past few incrementals, and it'll start restoring them to their SAN while the users are still actively using the one that's running on our machine, on our appliance. So that data is being restored while users are using the server in production. And once it finishes restoring the full amount of data for the VBK and VBIs, What it then does is it does a vMotion from our appliance to their ESXi hosts. And you can see as it's going, you'll see the virtual machines that we recovered. You'll see them move over to their vCenter. Zero interruption to the customer. There's no reboots required, etc. So real nice solution for getting a server back up and running quickly. And then to end this, because this was a test, let's say the customer this wasn't a disaster, they wanted a test, we would have put this on a different network. We wouldn't have put it on production. So we put it on a separate VLAN. They can log in, as Walter mentioned, they can validate all their data's there. They can make sure the applications are working. And when they're done, we just simply go to stop publishing. Yes, and it's basically going to tear that environment down. So here's the server at the login screen. And momentarily, you're going to see it disappear from here as Veeam removes it. Walt, any closing thoughts on instant recovery? Anything you want to throw in?
No, as I said, it's an amazing feature to be able to give people back full servers within a matter of minutes as opposed to hours. So it speeds up any restoration process.
Yeah, Walter, you also mentioned restoring to the cloud. So a real neat feature, which will be another day's demo, is when you right-click on any of your backups, you can restore it directly to Amazon EC2 or to Azure. So real nice. You can stand these servers up, migrate to any public cloud. If you're migrating between data centers, we can do it with the IR. So a lot of different things you can use Veeam for other than just backup. It's great for migrations, and it's really great for disaster recovery. So thanks, Walt. Thanks, Maria. I'll talk to you in the next video.